We're going back to 2007, the early days of the PlayStation 3, with one of its earliest games, or one of its earliest exclusives at the very least, and that was Heavenly Sword. Now there was quite a lot of hype around this at the time, from what I remember anyway. I got a PS3 on launch date, of course, and this didn't come out too long after. I think we had the PS3 launch in mid-2007 here in the UK, and this came out around September time, so it was almost a launch title, but I never ended up getting it because, I don't know, I was a teenager, games were expensive for a new console. They still are, generally speaking, always pretty pricey when it's a new generation game, and I already had 4 or 5 games on the PlayStation 3, so I pretty much had my fair share for the year until that Christmas, and this just slipped by me. I'd never played it before doing this video. I've always heard about it. From what I was aware, it was a hack and slash, and having now played it, yep, it's a hack and slash game. I didn't realise how much of an emphasis it would have on story though, so let's talk about that first. And the story itself is pretty simple, a typical good guy versus bad guy deal for the most part. The only real world or lore building that's done is around the Heavenly Sword itself that the game is named after. It's some kind of godlike sword from the heavens that angels or something from the heavens used to defeat evil demons way back, and now it's in the realm of mortals for their own use. As you can imagine, the sword itself wields great power, but it slowly kills whoever is using it. This world appears to be made up of a whole bunch of clans that are constantly feuding with each other, and there's one clan that has taken upon itself to protect the sword and keep it within their grasp in order to stop people warring over its power. And you play as Noriko, a member of this clan, the daughter of the leader of the clan, Master Shen. And your bad guy opponent is King Bohan, a big evil guy who wants to take over the world using the Heavenly Sword.
Bow to me and bask in my reflected glory.
And he has a bunch of typically evil-looking minions serving him. Now, right off the bat, I'm gonna say, these guys are great. The bad guys are the best characters in the whole story. They are absolutely insane.
Perhaps I'm not making myself clear. I have something of yours, and you have something of mine!
They're completely over the top to the point where it's ridiculous, but it's actually kind of funny. I really like it.
As you're here looking for your father, I say you might have a troubling time finding all the pieces.
The good guys, on the other hand, can be a little bit boring. Now, Noriko, who you play as throughout most of the story, is a badass, but I don't know, it never really comes across as genuine. I think that's the problem with most of the good guys in this.
How could Shen be so foolish as to trust you with the sword? You of all people!
There was a time when I cared what the clan thought about me. But that time is past.
Then I shall pray for the world, Noriko!
You play as one other character, Kai, who is just as insane as the bad guys, but in her case it feels kind of forced, like it's a forced wackiness.
Bird or worms? It's tasty.
I don't know, it doesn't come across as well, but it's a little cringy. It's not hateable, the character isn't completely hateable and unlikable, but I don't know, it doesn't really work as well as it does with the antagonists.
We may need you to play Twing Twang.
Yes, Noriko. We'll find a place to hide. Won't we?
So there's this whole prophecy revolving around someone who will wield the sword and unite all the clans and that kind of thing, and early in the game you're forced to wield the sword in order to defend yourself or save your father, that kind of thing. I can't remember exactly, but that's how you end up using the sword and thus fulfilling the prophecy. I don't think that's really a major spoiler, as like I said, it's a pretty typical plot. So that about sums it up nicely there. It was supposed to be quite a cinematic experience, which was a relatively new thing at the time for video games. Don't get me wrong, other games had been trying to do the whole storytelling in a Hollywood movie style for quite a while. It wasn't totally new, but this generation, the PS3, Xbox 360 generation, was the first time it started to feel a little more possible, like you could actually present a Hollywood style story as a video game. Now, by today's standards, it's been overtaken dramatically. Loads of games have a powerful cinematic style of storytelling which work incredibly well, many of which being hailed as some of the best games of all time. Look at the Uncharted series, The Last of Us. It's everywhere now. But this was really ambitious for the time period, and you can really see the amount of effort they put in, even if a lot of the characters come across as over the top and, I don't know, some of them fall a bit flat. But damn, they really tried with this. They wanted to make the cinematic home video game experience. And this presentation is really where the game truly shines. It's an incredible looking game for the time, and to this day it ages pretty well compared to other games from 2007 on a home console. This looks pretty damn good. Even on a 50-inch TV, it's looking nice for me. The environments look great, even though they don't vary all that much. It's forgivable because it's a fairly short game and they all look absolutely brilliant, so you don't have to worry too much about the look of the game getting stale, but if it was a longer game then this would definitely be an issue. And if the presentation is the highlight, then the highlight of the highlight is the character models, especially the faces. They really did a great job here. The motion capture used, the expression you can see on the characters' faces is even good by today's standards. Sure, today the character models and their faces will look better, but you still get some games that don't get this bit just that right. That motion capture, the animation of the face, going hand in hand and actually creating something that looks quite natural, and especially for the time period, this is a really unique thing they've got going here and is by far the thing that they should be the most proud of, and trust me they are, because you get a lot, and I mean a lot, of close-ups in this. Honestly, they're lucky this has aged quite well, because even the game's main menu screen is just a close-up of Nariko's face, so you'll be seeing a lot of it. There are a few performance issues though. There are some indications that this is an early generation game. This was one of the first games that came out on the PlayStation 3. I say one of the first, it was very early at least. So I did encounter some frame rate issues. Nothing that was really bad that interrupted the gameplay, but noticeable, which is important in a fast-paced game like this, being a hack and slash. And every now and then something weird will happen, like this guy here just running into a wall for all eternity. But these are fairly minor things, it doesn't happen all that often, it's not full of bugs, generally speaking it functions pretty well. So when it comes to the gameplay, it's a pretty typical hack and slash. It does have its own thing going for it though. Perhaps the big main difference is the use of the Heavenly Sword. This does work pretty interestingly, it feels like they could have done a bit more with it, but the basic way in which it works here is you've got 3 different stances you can have. So triangle and square are your attack buttons. Pressing them as they are will do normal attacks in the speed stance. You've then got a range stance, which is where you hold the R1 button down whilst you're pressing square and triangle. And through this you do attacks that do a bit less damage but cover a wider range and often also hit multiple enemies a lot of the time. You've then got a power based stance by holding down R1 whilst you attack, which does slower but more powerful attacks. And you can mix and match these for all sorts of combos to achieve the results you want. You unlock more combos over time, which works okay, but it feels like there could have been a little bit more depth here. Maybe moves you can unlock, some kind of currency. Think God of War. There's other ways this can be done to create a little bit more depth. It didn't feel like the gameplay changed all that much from start to finish. By the end of it, I didn't feel more powerful than I did before, which, considering it's supposed to be a godlike magical sword, I don't know, I kind of wanted that feeling. Now you use the right analog stick to dodge, which means you have quite limited control over the camera. You use R2 and L2 to shift the camera left and right. In this game it's okay. It could have been a lot worse if they went for more complicated environments in which you are fighting in, but luckily the mostly fixed camera angle works okay. They've made sure you don't end up in situations where you can't see much and things block your vision. So it works just fine here, and it's something you do see in a lot of other hack and slash games as well, so it's not anything too new, but I would have liked a bit more camera control. The real main issue with using the right stick to dodge is it feels like it's the only thing in the game that has a bit of a delay to it. Like the animation doesn't quite line up with when you're actually pressing the button or moving the analog stick. With everything else working so precisely, it can take you out of the action a little bit as you adjust. And then blocking is a case of you press nothing to block a normal attack, and then the enemies that can do power attacks as well, which you can block by going into the power stance. At first I didn't like pressing nothing to block, but enemy attacks are pretty well telegraphed. They'll have this aura glowing around them, a blue one if it's a normal attack, an orange one if it's a powerful attack, so you can pretty easily get the gist of it. And then using the triangle button is how you can then counter-attack after a block, which is a very important part in taking out some of the more armoured, heavily defended enemies. And speaking of the enemies, it's a little disappointing here because you pretty much face the same few enemies, typical foot soldiers, throughout the entire game, outside of the odd boss fight and one or two unique enemies that pop along. It's these guys almost the whole game. Again, the short length makes it seem not too tedious in this respect. It would have been nice if they just took the same enemy and gave it a palette swap or a new model, so at least it looked different when you were facing them, even if they functioned the same. So the combat is give or take, it works well enough, and 99% of the time you will be having fun with it, so it's nothing much to complain about. It has ways in which it can improve, but it's not bad. Don't take that away from this. It's certainly not bad gameplay. The only moments of the game I would say are actually bad, I don't know, bad may be a strong word, more boring, are the shooting-based segments of the game. Now when you shoot or throw something, any kind of projectile, you can go into aftertouch sequence, which basically means it will slow down the projectile and you can direct it in the air to where you want it to go. If you don't do that, aiming is extremely difficult and doesn't work too well. Trying to get anything at a long range, even if the reticle is in like the perfect position and it looks like you should be hitting a target, you have to fire like 5 or 6 times and then you might not hit, and then there's a whole bunch of enemies and you need to go back into using the aftertouch to slow it down. But then the problem with using aftertouch all the time is it makes these segments last ages. It's fun the first 1 or 2 times you activate it, but after you've hit like the 15th guy with one of these arrows in slow motion, it's not fun anymore, it just drags. And this is also the main mechanic they use for solving puzzles, usually involving you throwing a shield that you find in a box. That tends to be the main way. You throw these at, basically, they're buttons is what they are. They usually take the form of like a gong, but it's a button really. You throw the shield, you direct it in the right path, it hits the gong, the button, whatever, and it'll open a door or activate something. Sometimes, to make it a little more complicated, you'll have to bounce it off another surface, which, I mean, it took a little bit of practice, but eventually it's not that bad to do. Again, it's more a bit tedious if you do fail, and you have to go through the whole slow motion sequence again. I guess what I'm saying here is overall, where the game shines in terms of gameplay is the combat. It's not perfect, but the other segments are just a bit They take you out of the fast-paced, enjoyable combat and put you in something slow-paced that you actually want to rush through to get back to doing the combat. What we end up with here is a game that had a huge amount of effort put into the presentation and storytelling, even if it does fall flat at times. But the gameplay, it's on and off. You gotta remember, this came out at a very similar time to the God of War games, so there were already games doing this exact style of gameplay, but better. So it's not like this has just aged badly, and it's not that it's bad either, it's just that it doesn't quite live up to the hype and the amount of effort that was put into creating it. I think it does suffer from being an early game of its generation. It hasn't quite worked out how to make the most of the PlayStation 3 system yet, so we get a few bumps along the road. Now, most of the footage you're seeing in this video is from the first half of the game, because that's when I got most of my recording in, but I did actually beat this game. It's not long at all, only around 6 to 8 hours I'd say at an estimate, which isn't too unusual for a hack and slash game like this, but it may not have met expectations at the time for a big epic adventure. But I'm quite happy though. I think this was just the right length. I think any more time would have been a little too much considering its flaws. I can say I've beaten this game, it's done, I never have to play it again necessarily now, and I'm quite happy with that too. There was talk for a while, a number of years ago, about a sequel happening, but it just never came to be, which I think is a shame because this definitely has the potential to be a series of games. It's a shame that this is just one standalone game in this series. You can build on this story quite easily. The Heavenly Sword itself doesn't necessarily have to be in this time period with these characters, so you could do a lot with it if you really wanted to. As a standalone, now mostly forgotten about game, I'd say it's worth a shot. I'd recommend it to most people to just try out and see if they like it. Whether you happen to own the PS3 version, it might be available on PlayStation Now, don't quote me on that, but I feel like it is. I don't have my phone near me to quickly do the research, so you'll have to just figure that out. But if it is on there, give it a shot, play it for a couple of hours, and you'll quickly see whether or not you like it. Its present day value comes from just being a quick game you can breeze through in 1 or 2 sittings. It's a bit of fun with a fun little story behind it. You may as well give it a shot. You're not going to be out of pocket much for doing so. Now, just to touch on a couple of other elements that I haven't mentioned. There are unlockables in the game that you get just from... I mean, it looked like I was just getting them from just playing the game. As I raked up some combos, it would be like, oh, you've unlocked some artwork, and I was like, okay, cool, that's good, I guess. And it is pretty cool, you get some nice artwork here. Here's one thing I mentioned in the Intellivision video that I said more games should do, and this one does it. You get a documentary, you get a making of the game, which you unlock chapters of as you play through the game. And these are really cool, it really lets you see what the developers were going for, what sort of an end result they wanted, and a bit of a look into the development cycle of a game that's being made for a whole new system. The PlayStation 3 was brand new. And one little thing I didn't know where else to mention is, why do these guys all just sleep on the ground outside? Like, what's going on here? They're surrounded by buildings, they're a clan. I assume this is where they live, this is their town or their fortress. Why don't they go inside to go to sleep? Why on the ground outside? And these are the high-ranking members of the clan. What if it rains? Do they just lay there? Surely they get cold? I don't know, it's just a little thing I noticed that seemed really bizarre. Like they just didn't have an indoor environment rendered, so they went with what they already had. So there we have it, first PS3 game I've had a look at, and I wanted to make sure it was a PS3 game this time, so that's now every home console I've had a look at least one game on. Still gotta do some portable ones though, but I don't own nearly as many portable games for the Vita or PlayStation Portable as of yet. I do have the means to record them though. I have a hacked Vita, so that does the job just fine. Maybe I'll look for something on one of those systems soon. But anyway, thanks for watching. This was a fun game to play this time. I quite enjoyed playing through it. I managed to complete it, which means it held my attention to the end of the game, which is, I don't know, can you ask any more from a game? If it keeps your attention for long enough for you to complete the game, it must be at least somewhat good. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Pretty fun.